Hello everyone, as you know, I'm Brian from A Day Without Love. Today I just did a podcast with...
Katie Kruger of Show Me Your Playlist.
And tell me, what is Show Me Your Playlist about?
So Show Me Your Playlist is this idea that I created. I love music. I love being able to create playlists. We all make them. It's really centered around Philly and musicians, artists, entrepreneurs, photographers, people who are doing cool things that contribute to the city and contribute to just like a positive reinforcement of doing cool things. And I ask people to come onto the podcast and make playlists specifically to them. So we just did a playlist of songs to drive to gigs to.
Yep.
And I go over the songs and we play some, but I really want to get to know what people are doing and learn more about them and learn about new music that I might have not listened to before, and also share that music with as many people as I can, because Spotify's algorithms are shit lately.
Yeah. The world of Spotify is, I think, something that everybody's trying to figure out, like big and small.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're doing the Show Me Your Playlist idea, I think is very good, especially on like a regional basis, like in Philly, because there's so much here in Philly and like we don't even know about it.
We don't even have the pulse on it. Like I met you, I've met other artists, I've met musicians. Whenever I meet someone now, I just ask them, like, I want to know what they're doing creatively, or what they're inspired to do. And then I ask them, like, hey, do you want to make a playlist? Do you want to come on the podcast? I want to podcast. There's so many of them. And I think the best part is I want to make it big for Philly. I want to make it something where people want to come on and talk about the things that they're doing. And I want to know more music. There's so much out there, and we all have our own eclectic tastes. And I think it's really interesting to see what people come up with for playlists.
Yeah, definitely. So like outside of like playlists, I think a lot of what you're doing is very community oriented. Like what makes community important for you in terms of music?
I think community, especially as an artist, as a visual artist, it can be intimidating. As much as you can throw out the word community, to enter into a community and to feel like you're a part of something is still very intimidating. And it can be I have social anxiety, and I can only imagine what others can go through at times. So I have kind of spun with Show Me Your Playlist, and I created an art music collective called Show Me Your Art. It's kind of all branding together. I got a residency at Original 13 Ciderworks. You came to our last one for Year of the Femme art show. It's where I take a local musician and a group of local artists, and we have for First Friday local art and music together. And I'm creating this little community and becoming a part of a bigger community, because we were talking about this earlier, is that Philly is huge. And there might be chances that you might not ever meet a person if you don't put yourself out there. And with it being so overwhelming to kind of like make that, like to dip your toe in that water, I want to take seasoned artists and new artists and combine them. Just like I think with community is that it's needed to make people feel welcome, but it's how do you open up that path for people to walk down to feel that they're a part of that community. And if I can just take that like one little aspect of helping a new business get more foot traffic while bringing more artists together and having music be a part of that, and creating this environment that everyone wants to be a part of, then a visual artist can start talking to you about music, and you can ask a visual artist about their artwork and what it means to them, and how a song that maybe you wrote kind of reflects the same thing of what they feel. I think it's just finding that common ground, but with community, we all have to start laying the like sidewalk for people to walk into, because we can call it a community, but if it's just the same same people that are around each other, you've created a closed off community.
You're about diversity.
Yeah, it's all about diversity, and it's about showing the path of like how to come into that community. And I talked about it earlier. There was an activist that said, when my brothers draw a circle to exclude me, I draw a bigger circle to include them. And it doesn't have to come from a negative spot. It's just, if we're constantly striving to make our circles bigger, then no one's going to feel excluded ever.
And I like that because, like, I guess you call it your show me platform. Just show me your playlist, show me your art. I think the most beautiful thing about inclusion in general is you get to see people's different backgrounds and different ways of arriving at the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Take something that I also love, especially when I vlog with people, like food.
Yes.
One of my favorite foods in general are noodles.
Okay.
But like if you take the noodle itself, there's so many different backgrounds and ways of making noodles. There's Italian noodles, there's Sicilian noodles, there's glass noodles, there's
rice noodles, egg noodles.
But they all come from different people with different backgrounds and different stories to tell. And when you're hearing like the same story all the time, it gets very old, and then like no one gets a voice to actually be heard. And
you find less participation that way.
Exactly.
When you're constantly creating the same thing over and over and over. When I first came to Philly, I was able to be a part of a couple art shows, but I found it was the same people over and over, and they were very exclusive, and they're doing something awesome, but at the same time, I just feel like that's not something I want to be a part of.
True.
I don't want there to be something that there's places for curating, and for what I'm trying to do, I'm curating, but I'm curating with a community, with people, not with like specific artwork. I think everything has its place.
Definitely. And then I have two more questions for you. What you just said, like you came from Philly. So what were you doing before, assuming that you were doing something musically?
So I am not a musician. I did go to school for the first 2 years for music. I come from a music background. I'm originally from upstate New York, from Albany area. I lived there. I went to school in SUNY Buffalo. I lived in Brooklyn, and then I moved out to Cincinnati, and I was out there for 5 years, and I came back. My love for music, one, will always start with my parents, but I worked in the music business. I worked for Equal Vision Records and Merch Now for about 5 years. And I was working for them, and I saw the start and the birth of Spotify. We were giving music to Spotify when they were still in like Sweden, before they came to the US. Yeah. And they actually gave us free Spotify accounts when they first came to the US, because we gave the music, like rights to play the music in Sweden, or in Europe. I did branding and marketing for bands. So when a band was like, I want a new I don't want just a t-shirt. I want something that like my fans are going to want to buy. So like the wristbands and the frisbees and the hats and the, keychains. Yeah, exactly. So when someone wanted that, I would source out and figure out, what demographics. I also did tour sponsorships as well. And when you're in the music business, it gets tiring. It's exhausting. You're constantly working. There's a lot of sexism, unfortunately, that you deal with. There's a lot of things that you see that that don't align with your morals. And so when you're constantly battling, like, do I want to stay in this? Do I want to keep trying to advance my career in a spot where I'm going to start hating music, and I don't want to hate music? And I decided to leave and start doing marketing for Ray-Ban, actually. That's why I moved to Cincinnati for that specifically. I wanted to do marketing elsewhere, and kind of just give my brain a break from the music business.
Understandable. Actually, now I have another question.
Yeah, of course.
Before I wrap up with like what you're doing in the
Yeah.
future. So I think it was very interesting that you said that you experienced sexism. I'm not saying it's interesting because like we are very aware that like the music industry has a lot of bigots in it. You have transphobic people, you have sexists, you have racists, you have ableists. You have rapists too. And my question is, how, what advice or how did you survive moving forward before you decided to make that transition?
So my advice is, if you want to stay in the business and you want to pursue something, work with bands that are morally aligned. Work with musicians. Get to know your clientele and separate money from the bigger picture.
True.
Have a line, draw that line, and stick to it. It's harder when you're making a lot of money and a lot of money is coming in. I loved working for the people that I worked for at Equal Vision and Merch Now. I just know that on a larger scale with bands and tour sponsorships, I couldn't always back doing my work. It's like working for the banking industry and
I literally just quit my job in finance.
See, and so like
that was part of what the motivation came from.
Yeah,
it's about you. So, yeah.
Is like, so you realize that you pick and choose. Like there's good and bad to every job. Like you could be a social worker and there's still good and bad. Like even though that you're giving something. So you really have to, when you realize something doesn't feel right, find who you want to work with and work with it, and don't think of it as a monetary expense. And I always give my like piece of advice for bands and musicians that are like, I want to get signed to a record label, don't strive towards that, because you don't make money off your music. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen that way. But
it's true. I'm the musician.
It sucks. But really own in on finding good PR and a good management, because a good manager is going to stick by you and make sure that they get you the gigs that pay. They're going to stick by you to make sure you get paid, because that's the only way they get paid. Where record labels, they're going to get paid no matter what, because you're signing a contract telling them that you're going to make them money one way or another. Yep. Whether it's off merch, make your own merch, put out your own music, just get a good manager and a good PR, and that's your music will speak for itself. Like if you are a good musician, a good band, get a good management company, and like, and be the positive change in the music community that's needed, because more people are going to want to work with you. But that is my advice for sure. For like, don't look at everything as a monetary level. I know it's hard when we're putting in hours of work on projects and we're not seeing any money back. Sure. We just have to realize that you could be stuck in a cubicle for 40 hours a day making the money and not being fulfilled, and realize what you're doing is fulfilling you and not, even though it's not paying you, it's paying you in other ways, and you kind of have to have that gratitude.
And I think that's true for almost anything, because like part of why I quit working in the finance industry is like, granted, I was still getting underpaid.
Yeah.
That money was the most amount of money I ever made, but driving an hour and a half each way,
not worth it.
It's not worth it. And like self-care is so important, especially when it comes to survival. And like when you realize, like you just said, like when you realize that something isn't in alignment with who you are, what you believe in, don't do it. So,
don't at all.
So my last question is, what do we have in your future? Like, what are you going to do?
So I really just want to keep making Show Me Your Playlist, the podcast, a bigger and more expansive for Philly. I want people in Philly to know about it. I want people in Philly to embrace it. I will also do I call them BFF-sodes with my friends that being in the music business and traveling all over, I've made friends all over that still do really cool stuff, but I want Philadelphia. I want this to be a representation of the cool things and what Philly has to offer. And I want to project it out there. So I'm going to keep working and fine tuning Show Me Your Playlist. I also am really hoping for this art collective to any artist or musician who wants to work with me. I want to work with them. It's still in its kind of infancy, so I'm taking it step by step. Our next art show is going to be April 5th at Original 13 Cider Works on North American Street in Kensington. It's going to be Skate Your Art Out. It's going to be like a skateboard related art show.
Sick.
Elaine Rasnick and Kate Dressed Up are going to be playing on it, and I'm lining up. I have like a million messages from people on the DIY collaborative page. I am going to reach out to everyone. I appreciate everyone's hard work, but I just really want this to make a collective. I'm not breaking the mold by making a collective. If you are in another part of Philly and you think it's what I'm doing is cool and you're in West Philly, do the same exact thing. It's not like find a bar that wants, art shows and First Friday happenings and just negotiate with them and get it going, because the more art that's happening and the more events, there's a need for it. And I definitely am not the first pioneer. There's tons of art music collectives in the city. I'm just going where it's needed, and there's not a lot of foot traffic in that part of Kensington, and I want everyone to enjoy art and music where it's not happening.
I love it.
Yeah, awesome.
I'm going to put all of the socials under the description section. Follow, comment, subscribe, support the Patreon if you want, and definitely go to Show Your Art events and listen to Show Me Your Playlist podcast.
Yes.
Thanks.
Listen to this big guy right here. Listen to him.
Yeah. So thanks for watching, and peace.
Thanks.
All right.